Hey guys, tonight we're going to walk a road older than cities, older than kings, and older than money itself. It's a road without cobblestones, without mile markers, just faint trails through grasslands, winding riverbanks and mountain passes worn into the earth by countless bare feet. The year is about 8000 BCE, the place, somewhere between the volcanic highlands of Anatolia and the wide fertile plains that stretch toward the Mediterranean. The air is sharp and dry, the horizon hazy with the smoke of distant hearths. Around you people are gathering, not for war, not for worship, but for something even more binding, trade. They've brought hides still smelling faintly of the animals they once covered, baskets brimming with grain and bundles of dried meat, and in return they hope to take home something far rarer, something sharp enough to shape the future obsidian, black volcanic glass, shimmering faintly under the sun, each piece no bigger than your palm but worth more than any single meal. You probably won't survive this road if you don't know what you're doing. One wrong barter, and you'll return home empty-handed, your reputation bruised as much as your feet, and that's if no one robs you along the way. Before we step fully onto the road of obsidian, I want you to imagine, you're here to trade without money. Everything you offer must matter to someone else enough for them to part with their treasure. There's no fixed value, no coins to weigh. You have to read faces, test goods with your hands, smell the grain, and run your thumb along the edge of a blade without slicing yourself. If you're listening right now, post your location and your local time in the comments. Think of it as our own little trade route, linking night to night across the world. And tonight, as we walk this ancient road together, remember, sleep well, but keep one hand on your bundle. In the beginning, trade was survival's handshake. You needed what you didn't have, and someone else had what they didn't need. Maybe you'd trapped more rabbits than your family could eat before the meat spoiled, but your spear tip had snapped. Someone in the next valley, meanwhile, had obsidian cores the size of your fist but no steady supply of hides. One meeting, one deal, and suddenly 2 lives improved. No currency, no written contract, just mutual need. That's the first spark. And it didn't start with obsidian, not exactly. It started with simple swaps, meat for berries, water for shelter, bone needles for dried fish, but some goods stood out. Obsidian wasn't just another pretty rock, it was sharper than anything else in the Stone Age toolkit. It cut cleaner than flint, shattered into predictable shapes, and could be renewed again and again by careful flaking. A good obsidian blade could mean the difference between bringing down a deer cleanly or chasing a wounded animal for miles until exhaustion and possibly predators claimed it. Even before permanent settlements, word spread about places where obsidian could be found. It was never just lying around on every hill. You had to know where ancient volcanoes had erupted and left behind veins of glass-like rock, and that meant someone, somewhere was willing to walk for days to get it, or to find someone who already had. Over time, a few things became clear. First, obsidian wasn't evenly distributed. Some regions had it in abundance, others had none at all. Second, carrying it was tricky, too much and it slowed you down, too little and you'd run out before reaching your next market. And third, people quickly realized that control over a source meant power. If you had easy access to obsidian, you could dictate terms. If you didn't, you had to make yourself useful enough to be welcomed back. We think of value now in coins, bills, or numbers on a screen, but for early traders, value was a lived reality. That sharp edge might mean you could cut meat cleanly and avoid wasting food. That core might be reworked into dozens of arrowheads, and for some a polished obsidian mirror wasn't just useful, it was magical. Imagine seeing your face clearly for the first time in something that wasn't water. In some cultures, obsidian became a bridge between the living and the spiritual, a material worthy of ceremony as well as survival. So here you stand, on this early trade route. There's no marketplace yet, no permanent stalls, but there's an understanding between you and those who arrive here. You'll show what you've brought, they'll show theirs, and you'll talk, or gesture, if you don't share a language until you reach an agreement. It's not all smooth, there's mistrust, sometimes outright trickery. Maybe a core has cracks hidden under a layer of dust. Maybe the grain you're offered is infested with insects you won't notice until you're days away. You learn to inspect everything, to feel the weight of an item in your palm, to test the edge of a blade on your fingertip, not enough to cut, but enough to feel its bite. And slowly, across these exchanges, an invisible network forms. A person you traded with months ago recognizes you and vouches for you to others. You hear about new routes, dangerous floods, or a rival group who started demanding tolls. You learn that obsidian from one mountain flakes differently from another, that some pieces have a smoky hue while others are jet black, that certain patterns of banding are prized far beyond their practical use. Even without money, these exchanges create relationships, expectations, and reputations. you begin to realize that on this road, trust is worth as much as the goods you carry. If you're known to trade fairly, people will walk days out of their way to meet you. If not, you might find the next camp strangely empty when you arrive. This is the earliest economy, not yet markets as we know them, but an endless braid of movement, barter and mutual survival. And Obsidian is at its core, its black sheen glinting under the sun, sharper than anything else you own, and if you can hold on to it, your passport to the next stage of the journey. Obsidian is not a stone you stumble over while taking a stroll. It is born in fire, in the violent heart of a volcano. The only way it exists is if molten lava, rich in silica, cools so quickly that it has no time to form crystals. What you end up with is volcanic glass, hard, brittle, and sharper than the best metal scalpels forged thousands of years later. Run your fingers over a fresh flake, and it's smooth as still water, until you touch the edge, then it's all danger, a razor's kiss. In fact, in modern labs, obsidian blades can slice cells more cleanly than surgical steel. In 8000 BCE, that's not science, it's survival. The sharper your tool, the cleaner the cut on meat, the faster you can shape wood, and the less chance you have of smashing your thumb into uselessness while carving bone. But here's the strange part, you can tell exactly where a piece of obsidian came from, even thousands of years later. Every volcanic source has its own chemical fingerprint, a unique mix of trace elements locked into the glass when it formed. Today archaeologists use portable X-ray fluorescent scanners to zap a piece of obsidian and match it to a quarry hundreds of kilometers away. That's how we know that even in the Mesolithic and Neolithic eras, obsidian traveled distances no single hunter-gatherer could cover in a casual week's walk. Think about that. Before writing, before the wheel, humans were moving brittle, fragile glass across mountains, deserts and rivers, not because they were foolish, but because it was worth the risk. If you could stand at one of these ancient volcanic outcrops, you'd see why. The land is bare in places, stripped to bone by ancient lava flows, and scattered across it are nodules, smooth dark lumps like river stones, but heavier and with a duller shine. When struck with another stone, they fracture into pieces that catch the light like water at night. For early toolmakers, that glint was a promise. Obsidian cores were taken whole or shaped into rough blanks right at the source. This wasn't just about convenience, it was about weight. Raw nodules could be heavy and irregular, so breaking them into more portable, trade-ready forms made sense. The edges could be retouched later at a destination, but the bulk of the work, what archaeologists call primary reduction, was often done where the stone lay. That meant you didn't carry unnecessary material for miles. But there's more to obsidian than sharpness and portability. Culturally, it had a mystique. In Mesoamerica, thousands of years after our Anatolian traders, the Maya and Aztecs would use obsidian not only for weapons but for mirrors, ritual blades and even symbolic jewelry. In parts of the Near East its shine was linked to the underworld, or to divine fire. To hold a piece of obsidian was to hold the frozen breath of a mountain, a sliver of the earth's own violence, tamed to human hands. In Anatolia, obsidian from sites like Gölü Dağı and Nemrut Dağı has been found hundreds of kilometers away in early farming villages. Across the water, obsidian from Melos in the Aegean made its way to the Greek mainland and beyond. In the Americas, sources in central Mexico fed trade routes stretching into the Gulf Coast and deep into the Maya lowlands. These movements weren't random, they followed paths, often repeated over generations, until the routes themselves became as much a part of life as the goods they carried. And here's the kicker, the presence of obsidian in a settlement tells archaeologists more than just someone liked sharp knives. It speaks of networks, alliances, and maybe even diplomacy. If a coastal fishing village has obsidian from a mountain hundreds of kilometers inland, that means either they traveled there, they traded with someone who did, or they were part of a long chain of middlemen. In every case, it means human contact, negotiation, and some level of trust or intimidation existed between strangers. For you, as an ancient trader, understanding where obsidian came from is as important as knowing its uses. If you know the volcanic source, you can guess who controls it, how far they are and what they might want in exchange. If you recognize a distinctive gray-green sheen, you know it's from that one far-off mountain where the people value salt above all else. That's not trivia, it's the map in your head that guides every step of your journey. Of course, in a world without GPS, you don't find these sources easily. You hear of them in stories, sometimes wildly inaccurate ones passed along by other traders, hunters, or wanderers. Someone tells you of a black water stone high in the mountains, another swears it comes from the mouth of a sleeping giant. You sift myth from fact as best you can, because going the wrong way could mean weeks of wasted travel, spoiled goods, and no obsidian to show for it. But when you do find it, When you stand on that slope and see the ground glitter with volcanic glass, you know you've reached one of the beating hearts of the Stone Age economy. From here, pieces of that mountain will move into the hands of strangers hundreds of kilometers away, carried along trails that will in time become the first real roads. And you, holding a freshly flaked blade that could cut clean through hide in one swipe, understand why people risked everything to follow the road of Obsidian. You've held the stone in your hand, you've seen its edge catch the sun, but now comes the part that separates the locals from the network, the moment when Obsidian leaves the volcano and begins its journey into the wider world, and that journey, surprisingly, began far earlier than you might think. Archaeologists have found obsidian blades, cores and flakes at sites dating back over 12,000 years, far from the nearest volcanic source. That's not a casual someone dropped it on a hunting trip situation. That's systematic movement, evidence of an unspoken but reliable connection between places. In Anatolia, obsidian from the twin volcanic giants of Gölüdağ and Nenezidağ shows up in the earliest Neolithic villages like Çatalhöyük and Aşıklıhöyük, sites that were dozens or even hundreds of kilometers away. The obsidian here didn't just trickle in, it arrived in quantities that suggest regular shipments, almost like a scheduled delivery. Centuries before wagons or pack animals were common, people carried it on their own backs, slung in hide pouches or woven baskets, step after punishing step. And this wasn't unique to Anatolia. In the Near East, obsidian from sources in eastern Turkey made its way to Syria, Lebanon, and even as far as the Levant coast. How? Through chains of short, overlapping exchanges, one village trading with the next, each pushing the obsidian a little farther down the line. You didn't have to make the whole trip yourself, you just had to be one link in the chain. Half a world away, in the Americas, a similar story was unfolding. In central Mexico, the great obsidian fields of Pachuca, where the stone glowed with a distinctive greenish tint, fed routes that stretched hundreds of kilometers into the Maya lowlands. The people of Teotihuacan, centuries later, would all but monopolize this source, using it not just for tools but for control over trade itself. Even in the far north, in places like the Aleutian Islands and Alaska, obsidian moved between islands separated by icy channels, carried in skin boats as precious cargo. The earliest routes weren't marked by roads as we know them, but by memory, knowledge of where the rivers bent, where a mountain pass would be free of snow in summer, where a stand of trees gave shelter from wind on an exposed ridge. These paths were walked again and again until they became familiar, and familiarity became safety. Along them, campsites developed, sometimes just a patch of ground flattened by repeated use, other times a more established meeting place marked by stone circles or half pits. The people who made these trips weren't always full-time traders. Often they were hunters or gatherers who knew they'd passed near a source and decided to bring back obsidian as part of their seasonal movement. In some regions, specialists emerged, men and women whose main skill wasn't hunting or farming, but knowing how to move goods between distant groups without getting themselves or their cargo killed. As the centuries passed, the movement of obsidian began to leave its own archaeological fingerprints. Sites far from any volcano yield shards with chemical compositions matching specific sources, clear proof that people weren't just stumbling upon it by chance. In some cases, obsidian traveled over 500 kilometers from its origin before ending up in a new owner's toolkit. And the scale of it, that's the part modern minds struggle with. Imagine this: no maps, no currency, no beasts of burden, yet thousands of pieces of fragile stone moving steadily across whole continents. It's as if human beings, long before civilization in the formal sense, had already mastered the idea of a supply chain. You can picture it. One man leaving the obsidian fields in late spring, carrying a bundle of freshly struck blades. He travels 2 days to a fishing community that trades him dried salmon and seal oil. He passes some of that to the next group, who give him copper ore from a nearby mountain. By the time that obsidian reaches a farming village hundreds of kilometers away, it has passed through so many hands that no one in the final settlement has ever seen the volcano it came from, but they know its worth. They can feel it in the weight, in the flawless edge. There's a quiet sophistication in these exchanges. They're not about hoarding wealth or building empires, at least not yet. They're about survival, about getting what you need from people you might otherwise never meet. Obsidian just happened to be one of the best reasons to make those meetings happen. Soon, these routes would grow more structured, but here, at the dawn of long-distance trade, they're still fluid, shaped by rivers and seasons, by shifting alliances and quiet understandings. Every step along the road of obsidian strengthens a thread in the web of human connection, a web that will one day span the globe. You can't trade what you can't extract. Before obsidian became the sleek, flaked blades passed hand to hand along the road of obsidian, it was just part of the mountain, a lump of glassy rock embedded in a crust of hardened lava. Getting it out was the first test of skill, strength, and sometimes sheer nerve. Picture the setting: a volcanic slope, jagged underfoot, the ground littered with sharp shards that can slice skin through thin leather sandals. The air is still, except for the occasional gust that carries the faint smell of sulfur. Somewhere below, in the valleys, people tend their crops or prepare fishing nets. But up here, you and a few others are quarrying the Stone Age's sharpest treasure. The first step is finding the good stuff. Not every chunk of volcanic glass is worth carrying for days. Experienced miners look for nodules, rounded, dense masses with a slightly waxy luster under the dust. You tap them with another stone and listen for the sound. A clean, ringing tink means the interior is solid. A dull thud means flaws, cracks, or bubbles that will make it useless for tool making. The tools are basic but effective. A hammerstone, dense and rounded, breaks the outer crust of weathered lava. Antler picks or chisels pry loose pieces from fissures. Every blow sends splinters flying, some no bigger than fingernail parings, others long and needle-sharp. Without eye protection, which no one has invented yet, you learn to angle your strikes away from your face. There's a reason obsidian extraction leaves archaeological quarry sites littered with waste flakes. Rough shaping often happens here at the source. Cores are struck free of excess material, leaving more portable forms for transport. This isn't just about convenience, it's survival. Every unnecessary gram adds strain to your back and slows your pace on the road. Worse, carrying raw irregular nodules means more edges to crack in a fall. Better to do the first reduction here, even if it costs an extra day of work. The work is slow. Heat from the sun bakes the slope by midday, forcing you to take shelter under overhangs or in shallow pits dug for shade. Water must be carried up from lower springs or fetched by someone assigned to the task. The rhythm is steady. Strike, test, turn the stone, strike again. When you do it right, the obsidian fractures with a conchoidal break, smooth curves like the inside of a shell. This natural pattern is what makes the stone so predictable to shape. But this isn't without risk. One careless slip and a flake will cut deep, blood welling fast from the razor-clean wound. Ancient miners carried plant resins or animal fat to seal such cuts, but infection was still a danger, and the slopes themselves could betray you. Unstable rock underfoot, sudden rock falls, even the rumble of a minor tremor reminding you that the mountain is only sleeping. Some quarrying was done in open pits. In other cases, people followed obsidian veins into shallow shafts. In places like Lipari, off the coast of Italy, volcanic glass was dug directly from cliff faces above the sea, the miners balancing on narrow ledges. In the highlands of Anatolia, extraction often happened at exposed flows where centuries of erosion had already done part of the work. Once you had enough to make the journey worth it, but not so much you'd collapse halfway home, you wrapped the pieces in animal hide or bundled them in woven mats. These bundles were precious now, not because they were finished goods, but because they were the raw promise of trade, the seed from which alliances and exchanges would grow. And here's something the modern mind often misses: quarrying wasn't always an open-access free-for-all. Even in prehistory, certain groups claimed rights over a source. That could mean paying in goods or services to be allowed to collect. Sometimes it meant being part of the group or married into it. In more dangerous cases, it meant sneaking in at night or during bad weather to avoid hostile locals. The right to gather obsidian could be as fiercely guarded as a gold mine thousands of years later. By the end of the day, the slope is quieter, the air cools, you have your load strapped tight against your back. Tomorrow you'll start the long walk down into the valleys, and from there onto the twisting network of paths that will carry your mountain-born glass to hands that have never seen a volcano. From rock to raw cargo, obsidian is ready to begin its true life, not as part of the earth, but as part of a bargain. Raw obsidian is just potential. It's heavy, unwieldy, and not yet worth its full trade value. To turn it into something others will travel days to acquire, you have to shape it into forms that are both useful and portable. That means hours of deliberate, patient work, guided by a skill set passed down through generations. You start with the core, a roughly reduced lump from the quarry. It fits in your hand like a small melon, its surface dull where you've knocked away the crust. The goal now is to create tools, or at least tool-ready pieces, that will tempt a trader into offering something you actually want. That might be a handful of salt, a bundle of dried fish, a woven garment, or a dozen other things obsidian can buy along the road. First, you choose your striking tool. A hammerstone is fine for removing large flakes, but for precision, you'll switch to softer hammers made of antler, bone, or hardwood. These absorb some of the shock, letting you control the fracture more precisely. Each strike follows an invisible geometry in your mind, angles that will encourage the stone to break in smooth, predictable curves rather than shatter into useless shards. This process, knapping, isn't just brute force. It's part craftsmanship, part listening. The sound changes when a flake detaches cleanly, a sharp, crisp chick compared to the dull snap of a mistake. The flakes themselves, thin as fingernails and sharper than razors, are valuable too. In some communities, even these tiny slivers were used for delicate work like scraping hides or cutting fine threads of plant fiber. The aim is to produce blades, points, or preforms. Blades are long, narrow flakes with parallel edges, ideal for mounting into wooden handles or using as is for cutting. Points, arrowheads, or spear tips require more shaping and pressure flaking along the edges, sometimes with a sharpened antler tine. Preforms are halfway products, rough shapes that a skilled craftsperson in another village can finish to their own needs. Preforms are a smart trade choice. They're lighter than raw cores but give the buyer flexibility to decide their final form. Sometimes you also work the stone into larger bifaces, double-edged tools that can serve as both knives and chopping implements. These travel well and are less fragile than thin blades. In certain cultures, such bifaces were prestige goods, valued not just for their utility, but for the sheer skill it took to make them symmetrical and flawless. While shaping, you also think about appearance. Not all obsidian is the same color. Some is pure jet black, others smoky gray, and some, like the Pachuca obsidian of Mexico, glows with a greenish tint in sunlight. A hint of mahogany banding or rainbow sheen can make a piece more desirable in a market hundreds of kilometers away. In later centuries, these variations would be prized for mirrors or ritual objects, but even now, traders notice beauty as well as sharpness. There's another reason to shape obsidian before transport: space efficiency. A carefully knapped core can yield dozens of standardized blades, each light enough to carry in bulk. If you transport finished tools, you can stack them tightly, wrap them in hide, and store them without too much risk of chipping. Raw nodules take up more space for less usable material. By the time you're done, the ground around you is littered with waste flakes and broken shards. These scatterings are the signature of your craft, and thousands of years later, archaeologists will read them like a diary. They'll be able to tell where you sat, which hand you favored, even the direction you struck from. They'll know that on this spot someone took a lump of volcanic glass and turned it into a currency of edges. Finally, you inspect your work. The blades are straight, the points even, the edges fine enough to shave a hair. You stack them in neat bundles, separated by layers of dried grass or bark to keep them from clinking together. The preforms are sorted by size, the biface is wrapped individually. Now you're not just carrying stone, you're carrying a store of value, a set of objects that can become almost anything in the right hands: food, clothing, tools, favors, or safe passage. Every flake struck from the core is a step further from the mountain, and a step closer to the moment when someone will hand you something in return, grateful to take this sharp black glass into their own life. And tomorrow you'll start packing them for the journey, a process that demands as much care as making them in the first place. You've shaped your obsidian into trade-worthy pieces, blades, points, preforms, but now comes the part that will determine whether they survive the journey: packing. Obsidian is sharper than almost anything else in the Stone Age toolkit, but it's also brittle. One careless jolt, one bundle dropped on a rocky path, and you've got a pouch of glittering waste instead of high-value goods. The first rule of carrying obsidian: no loose pieces. Even wrapped in hide, unseparated blades will knock against each other and chip. So you start by creating cushions. Dried grass is common, it's light, flexible, and easy to find. Bark shavings work too, curling naturally around the shape of a blade. In wetter regions, traders use strips of animal sinew, both to bind bundles and to wedge between layers as padding. You sort the goods by type. Finished points go together, blades together, preforms together. You stack them so no edge is directly touching another edge, always back to face with some kind of padding in between. Each stack is then wrapped in soft hide, tied tightly enough to hold but not so tight that it puts pressure on the edges. For longer journeys, you'll protect the bundles even further. Some traders place their wrapped goods inside rigid containers, hollowed gourds, woven reed boxes, or small wooden chests if they have access to carpentry. Others double wrap in hide, then coat the outer layer with pitch to waterproof it. If you're crossing rivers or coastal waters, that waterproofing can be the difference between profit and loss. Weight is a constant calculation. Every bundle adds to the load on your back, or if you're lucky enough to have a pack animal, to its burden. Too much weight, and you slow down, making you a target for thieves or giving the weather more time to turn against you. Too little, and you've wasted a trip. The experienced trader finds a balance, enough to make the journey worthwhile, but not so much that fatigue will ruin you before you reach the next exchange point. You also think about accessibility. On the road you may encounter impromptu trade opportunities, passing hunters, another caravan going the opposite way. You keep one or two smaller bundles near the top of your pack for quick bartering, the rest stays buried deep, safe from bumps and hands that might wander without asking. Some routes are rougher than others. If you're traveling through forests, your biggest enemy is the constant jostle of uneven ground. Across open plains, you worry about wind and dust creeping into your bundles, dulling edges or coating them in grit. In mountains, it's the ever-present danger of slipping and slamming your load against rock. Traders adapt to the route, sometimes wearing the bundles across the chest for more control, other times strapping them low across the hips to keep the center of gravity stable. Packing also has a social dimension. A neatly wrapped, well-tied bundle signals to others that you're a careful and professional trader. It builds trust. When you hand over a packet of blades, the person receiving it can tell by the weight, the feel, the way the knots are tied, that the contents will be worth the exchange. Sloppy wrapping, on the other hand, invites suspicion. If you didn't care enough to protect the goods, maybe you didn't care enough to make them well either. Before you set out, you take one last step. You mark some of the bundles not with writing but with subtle knots in the cordage or small bits of colored fiber tucked into the wrapping. These are for you, reminders of which obsidian came from which source, or which blades are the finest. That way, if you reach a market where green-tinted glass is prized above all else, you know exactly which bundle to pull without unwrapping them all. When the final knot is tied, the load is ready. It's heavy, yes, but balanced and secure. You hoist it onto your back and feel the familiar weight settle against your spine. This isn't just stone, it's your ticket through the season, your means of building alliances, your buffer against hunger in the lean months. From here, the real journey begins. The mountain has given up its treasure, your hands have shaped it, and now the road will decide whether it reaches the hands of someone who will trade you what you need most. The obsidian is ready, wrapped and balanced on your back. But now you have to answer the question, who will carry it to its next owner? Not everyone on the road of obsidian is a miner, and not every miner is a trader. Between the quarry and the final buyer, there's an entire cast of characters whose lives revolve around moving goods from place to place, sometimes for profit, sometimes for survival, and often for both. Some of these traders are specialists. In certain regions, whole families devote themselves to seasonal trading expeditions. They know the routes like a second home, where to find water, where to shelter from storms, which valleys hold friendly settlements, and which are home to people who might rob you as soon as look at you. Their knowledge is worth as much as the goods they carry, and for that reason, they're often welcomed even before their packs are opened. Others are part-time traders, farmers after harvest, hunters between seasons, fishers when the rivers run low. They travel with whatever surplus they have, grain, hides, dried meat, and they bring back whatever their home community needs most. These part-time traders might carry obsidian if they live near a source, or if they've bartered for it along the way, but they're just as likely to carry something entirely different on the return trip. Then there are the true middlemen. These are people who never see the quarry at all. They acquire obsidian from one group and pass it on to another, sometimes without changing its wrapping, sometimes breaking open bundles to mix it with goods from other sources. To them, the stone is less a sacred material, and more a stepping stone, something to be swapped for goods they can sell again at a better price farther down the line. In some cases, whole caravans form, not in the sense of wagons and camels, those come much later, but in clusters of people traveling together for mutual safety. A group of 3 or 4 traders with packs of stone might join a hunting party heading in the same direction, or walk alongside a family migrating for the season. This loose protection makes the road less dangerous, but it also means you have to share water, shelter, and sometimes food. Carrying obsidian isn't only about physical endurance, it's about managing relationships. A friendly greeting to a group you pass might open the door for a quick exchange or a warning about trouble ahead. A careless insult could make you a target, and on a long journey, word travels almost as fast as you do. By the time you reach a market, people might already know whether you're a fair dealer or someone to avoid. Age doesn't disqualify a trader. Older men and women, no longer strong enough for hunting or farming, sometimes take on the role of messenger merchants, carrying smaller loads but relying on their long memory of routes and contacts. Children too are part of the trade world. They may not carry heavy loads, but they remember faces, help with packing, and learn to read body language during negotiations. What all these traders share is adaptability. No one walks the road of obsidian without being ready to change plans. A swollen river might force you onto a longer mountain route. A chance meeting with another caravan might lead to an unplanned trade, reshaping your cargo before you reach your intended market. In this world, flexibility is a survival skill. And then there's you. Maybe you're a miner carrying your own work to sell directly. Maybe you're a middleman trying to make your profit on the gap between 2 regions' desires. Or maybe you're simply a traveler who knows that a few well-made obsidian blades will open doors in strange villages. Whatever your role, the moment you step onto the trail with that black glass on your back, you become part of a network older than cities, a network built not of roads on a map, but of people's feet and the trust or fear they inspire. Tomorrow you'll follow those feet into the winding paths and hidden crossings that make up the earliest trade roads, routes carved not by kings but by the slow, steady need to connect one community's wants to another's abundance. The path is not a single road, there's no smooth surface, no carved stone. The roads of the Obsidian trade are more like veins running through the landscape, worn in by generations of feet, marked in memory rather than on any map. They twist and fork, sometimes disappearing entirely, only to reappear in a clearing or along a riverbank miles away. You start in the foothills, where volcanic slopes give way to grasslands. The first segment is steep, the air thinner than you'd like, and every step with the load on your back reminds you that obsidian may be light compared to granite, but it's still heavy enough to dig into your shoulders after hours. Downhill you have to watch your footing, one slip and you'll be rolling with a pack full of glass. The first landmark is a narrow pass between two cliffs. In summer, the wind funnels through it, carrying the scent of dry herbs and wild thyme. In winter, its treacherous ice forms along the rock walls and a single misstep could mean plunging into the ravine below. Traders know to time their departures, so they hit this point in the safe months. Once through, the trail drops into a river valley. Here the route branches. One path follows the river downstream, winding past fishing camps and reed marshes where water birds explode into flight at your approach. The other path cuts across the valley and climbs toward a plateau, a shorter route in distance but exposed to winds that can strip heat from your body in minutes. Some traders follow the river for the safety of steady water access, others risk the plateau to reach the next market sooner. You choose based on what's in your pack. Perishable goods favor speed, bulk goods favor safety. With obsidian, speed matters less than protection, so you might take the slower, safer way unless you've heard of trouble along it. Every few days' walk, there are crossing points, places where the paths converge into a clearing or a bend in the riverbank. Here travelers rest, share news, and sometimes trade. These are not permanent markets, but they're the lifeblood of the road. At one stop you might hear that a bridge of logs downstream has been swept away. At another, someone might warn you of a rival group demanding tolls from anyone passing their stretch of trail. Geography shapes everything. In mountainous regions like Anatolia, the trade routes hug valleys and skirt ridgelines to avoid snowfields and rock slides. In the Aegean Islands, they are as much by water as by land, short coastal hops from one sheltered bay to another. In Central America, they snake through dense jungle, where humidity seeps into every bundle and insects find any gap in your wrappings. The routes are seasonal too. A river crossing that's knee-deep in summer might be chest-deep or impassable in spring floods. A high pass open in late summer might be buried under meters of snow in winter. Experienced traders keep mental calendars, knowing not just where to go but when. And then there are the invisible markers, knowledge passed from one trader to another, the tree shaped like a crooked spear that marks the turn toward a hidden spring, the patch of pale lichen on a boulder that means you're a half-day's walk from a safe camp. Without these cues you could wander for days in circles, even along what looks like a clear trail. At night, you camp in spots where the ground is flat enough to sleep without rolling into a fire pit or onto your pack. Fires are kept small to avoid attracting attention from the wrong eyes. In some places the stars are your only map, and knowing which constellation rises above which ridge can mean the difference between heading toward the next market and walking straight into nowhere. These trails, the sum of foot-worn dirt, river bends and memorized landmarks, are the earliest long-distance trade routes. They are not grand or permanent, but they work, and that's enough. Through them, obsidian flows from its mountain source to the hands of people who will never see where it came from, but will value it as if it were a gift from the gods. You've followed the trail for days, maybe weeks, and now you reach the moment every trader both anticipates and dreads: the barter itself. No coin, no fixed prices, no scales stamped with a king's seal. Here, value is not an absolute, it's a conversation, a dance, sometimes even a test of nerves. The first step is laying out your goods. In some places you'll do this literally: spread a hide on the ground and set out the blades, points or proforms so they catch the light. Obsidian rewards presentation. A sharp edge gleams and a perfectly symmetrical point has an elegance that needs no translation. In other regions, it's more discreet. You unwrap just one or two pieces at a time, keeping the rest hidden until you've gauged interest. The other side does the same. Maybe they've brought a basket of barley, a jar of honey, or a bundle of cured hides. Maybe it's something rarer, a lump of copper ore, a set of shell beads from the coast, or a packet of bright red ochre for body paint and rituals. The trick is to decide not just what you want, but what will carry value further along the road. You're not trading for your next meal, you're trading for your next trade. There's no universal language for barter, but there is a universal body language: tilted heads, pointed fingers, mimed cutting motions to test sharpness, hand spreads to indicate quantity. You might pass a blade to the other trader and watch as they test its bite on a strand of plant fiber. You test their barley by rolling a few grains between your fingers, looking for cracks or insect damage. Negotiations can be quick, a fair exchange obvious to both, or they can drag on for hours with offers and counter-offers punctuated by long silences. In some regions it's a game, each side feigning disinterest to drive the other into sweetening the deal. In others, the process is solemn, almost ritualized, with specific gestures marking agreement. Obsidian has the advantage of scarcity. If the people you're trading with don't live near a source, they may have seen it only rarely, or perhaps never. That rarity can be worth more than the object's practical use. You might secure not just goods but favors, safe passage through their territory, an introduction to another trading group, or a promise of shelter if you pass through in the future. Still, the barter road is full of pitfalls. Sometimes what looks like a great deal turns sour, a hide turns out to be brittle, grain spoils faster than promised, or a pot cracks on the journey. In a world without written contracts, the only recourse is your reputation. Cheat too many people, and you'll find doors closed and paths barred. Trade fairly, and you might find yourself offered better deals before you even ask. Barter isn't limited to goods. Skills can be traded too. A master napper might shape a few blades on the spot in exchange for food, using someone else's raw stone. A healer might offer a salve for a deep cut in return for a pair of finished arrowheads. In this way, Obsidian becomes part of a wider web of exchange, not just of things, but of knowledge and services. And then there's the unspoken truth. Sometimes barter is a test. A leader might watch how you handle yourself, whether you push too hard, give too quickly, or respect local customs. In the most successful exchanges, you don't just leave with what you wanted, you leave with your standing improved. By the time the deal is done, both sides have goods they value more than what they gave away. The Obsidian changes hands, wrapped and tied again, ready to move farther from its birthplace. And you, now carrying the weight of someone else's labor, prepare to move on to the next stop along the road of Obsidian, where the dance of barter will start again. Some trades happen quietly on the roadside, just two people exchanging goods and parting ways. Others take place in bursts of color, noise and motion, seasonal gatherings where the barter road swells with life. These aren't permanent markets in the city sense, but temporary convergences, often tied to the rhythms of the land, after the harvest, during the dry season, or when migrating herds pass through. You hear the market before you see it, voices layered over the sound of animals, the rhythmic clack of stone on wood as tools are tested, the faint strains of music from a reed flute or a drum. Then the clearing opens before you, and it's as if every settlement for days around has emptied into this one spot. There are no stalls yet, no neat rows of goods. Instead, people cluster in loose circles, each group gathered around a trader who has laid out their offerings on a hide or woven mat. The smell is an overwhelming mix: dried fish, fresh bread, animal dung, crushed herbs, and the sharp scent of newly tanned hides. The ground is trampled flat by countless feet, the grass worn away to bare earth. For a trader carrying obsidian, these gatherings are gold mines. Here you can meet not just one buyer, but a dozen. One person might want blades for skinning game, another might be after polished pieces for ceremonial purposes. You can test different deals, see which types of goods your obsidian draws most quickly, and gather information about distant routes. These fairs are more than economic hubs, they're social events. Families use them to arrange marriages, leaders to forge alliances, and healers to share remedies. Storytellers draw small crowds, their tales weaving news, myth, and entertainment into one. You might find yourself sitting beside a stranger who knows of a safer pass through the mountains or a shortcut between rivers. Sometimes the value of a market isn't in what you take home in your pack, but what you carry in your head. But with opportunity comes risk. Large gatherings attract not only traders but thieves, and disputes can flare quickly when dozens of groups with different customs and languages share the same space. Some markets have informal peace pacts for their duration. Violence is forbidden, at least within the circle of trade, but outside the agreed boundary, old rivalries might resume. Still, most traders respect the unspoken rule: these meetings are too valuable to ruin. You may haggle fiercely over a bundle of salt or a length of dyed cloth, but at the end of the day, you share the fire and trade stories. The road is long for everyone, and there's comfort in being among those who understand its demands. In some places, these gatherings become so regular that they leave traces in the land. Stones are placed to mark the meeting ground, paths widen from repeated use, Nearby water sources are improved with simple stonework to make them easier for many people to draw from at once. Archaeologists will later find layers of occupation here, broken pottery, lost beads, flakes of obsidian from tools made or repaired on the spot. By the time you leave, your pack might be lighter or heavier, depending on whether you've sold more than you've bought. Either way, you walk away richer in goods, in contacts, and in the web of human connection that stretches out along every fork in the road. And as you set off again, you know that somewhere up ahead, another gathering is waiting, and with it, the next turn in the winding journey of the black glass from the mountain. The road gives, but it also takes. Every trader knows that between one market and the next lies the stretch where anything can happen, and often does. The risks along the road of Obsidian are as varied as the landscapes it crosses, and sometimes they seem to conspire against you all at once. The first and most obvious threat is other people. Bandits may not be a full-time profession yet, but desperate or opportunistic groups know the value of an obsidian bundle. They lurk near narrow passes, hidden bends in rivers, or thick stretches of forest where visibility is poor. Some will ambush openly, rushing a lone trader with spears or clubs. Others will try to blend in, approaching as fellow travelers until you've let your guard down, then slipping a bundle from your pack when your attention drifts. Theft isn't the only human danger. There are also rival groups who claim control over certain stretches of the trail. Passing through without gifting them part of your cargo can spark conflict. Sometimes that gift is ceremonial, a token to acknowledge their authority. Other times it's an outright toll, paid with your best goods. Refusal can mean a blocked path, a smashed bundle, or worse. Nature offers its own challenges. Sudden storms can turn a dirt path into a river of mud, making it impossible to keep your footing with a heavy load. In mountain regions, rock slides or avalanches can cut off a route entirely, forcing a long detour that drains your supplies. Rivers you plan to wade across may swell overnight into torrents. Then there's the wildlife. In the highlands, wolves and mountain cats might stalk a lone trader. On the plains, snakes hide in tall grass, and a careless step can mean a bite that swells your leg before you can limp to safety. In river valleys, crocodiles or hippos can turn a simple crossing into a deadly gamble. Even the obsidian itself can be a hazard. If a bundle shifts suddenly, the sharp edges can cut through its wrapping and into your flesh. More than one trader has finished a journey with scars from their own cargo. Infection is a constant danger. A clean cut from obsidian may heal well, but a dirty one from a fall into grit and mud can kill just as surely as a spear thrust. Traveling in groups helps. More eyes mean more warning of trouble, and more hands mean more defense if trouble finds you. But groups also attract attention. A large caravan can be a tempting target, its collective wealth worth the risk for those willing to challenge it. That's why experienced traders keep their movements quiet. No loud calls, no big fires, no predictable schedules. And yet, despite the dangers, the road of Obsidian never empties. Every season, people take the risk because the rewards outweigh the fear. Those who survive learn the unspoken survival code: share water with strangers, warn others of hazards you've passed, and keep your promises. The road may be dangerous, but burn too many bridges, and the dangers will multiply. When you finally clear a risky stretch and see the land opening before you, wide plains under a clear sky, or a gentle valley where smoke from distant hearths rises, you feel the relief in your bones. You've kept your goods, your life, and your place in the network, but you know the next leg will bring its own tests, because on this road, risk is never behind you for long. By now you've traveled far from the quarry, and the obsidian in your pack has passed through more than one set of hands. But it's not just the stone that moves along the road of Obsidian, it's ideas, styles, and stories. Every time you trade, you don't just swap goods, you exchange pieces of culture. Think of it like this: a farmer from a river valley meets a herder from the highlands at a market. They speak different dialects, eat different foods, and worship different spirits, but each leaves carrying something of the other. The farmer now owns a knife whose haft is wrapped in braided leather, dyed with a pigment he's never seen. The herder goes home with a pouch of seeds for a grain that grows best in damp soil. In a single meeting, each has carried away more than just objects. They've carried away new possibilities. Obsidian is at the heart of this cultural spread. The very act of seeking it brings distant communities into contact. A trader delivering blades might also bring a new song, a style of pottery, or a way of arranging stones in a hearth. Sometimes these changes are subtle, a decorative notch on an arrowhead that mirrors the style of a group 2 valleys over. Other times they are transformative, a new tool design that spreads along the route until villages hundreds of kilometers apart are using the same kind of sickle or spear tip. It works in reverse too. A trader returning to the volcanic highlands might bring back seashells from a distant shore. These shells, worn as necklaces or sewn into clothing, become status symbols in places that have never seen the sea. Soon people are not only wearing them, they're imitating their shapes in clay or bone, turning the imported style into a local tradition. Even stories travel this way, a tale told around a fire in one market, about a hunter who outwitted a bear, or a flood that reshaped the land, might be told again hundreds of kilometers away, changed in detail but recognizable in its bones. Along with Obsidian, you've carried a rumor about a war far to the north, news of a disease spreading in the lowlands, or word of a new source of copper in a mountain no one in this valley has ever seen. Religious and ritual practices sometimes hitch a ride along these routes. In some places, obsidian is not just a tool-making material but a sacred one. A village that once used it only for knives might start using it in ceremonies after meeting a group that carves polished mirrors for divination. Symbols, gestures and even beliefs can spread in the same way as goods, sometimes intentionally, sometimes without anyone realizing it's happening. This cultural exchange isn't always peaceful. A style of weapon can carry with it a change in warfare, making conflicts sharper, faster, deadlier. New ideas about leadership, justice or kinship can unsettle old ways, but for the most part, the road of obsidian binds people together, creating a shared fabric of traditions that stretches far beyond any one community's territory. When archaeologists dig at a site centuries later, they'll find the evidence in layers: an obsidian blade from a far-off volcano lying beside a pottery shard in a style that originated elsewhere, all in a house built with construction techniques borrowed from yet another region. Each artifact is a thread in the larger weave, proof that before money, before empires, there was already a world connected by the movement of goods, ideas, and people. For you as a trader, this cultural spread is part of the reward. You're not just exchanging objects, you're a carrier of worlds. And with each deal struck and each road traveled, you add to the ever-growing network that makes human life richer, sharper, and more deeply intertwined. The road of obsidian is no longer just a scattered set of trails and occasional meetings. It's becoming an organized system. Where once a blade might have passed from hand to hand by chance, now there are predictable flows of goods, almost like a heartbeat pulsing through the land. You start to notice it in the patterns. Certain villages at key crossroads seem to always have fresh bundles of obsidian in stock. They don't quarry it themselves, but they've built a reputation as middle points where miners from one direction and coastal traders from another can meet. People know that if they arrive at the right time, they'll find what they're looking for. Over time, these crossroads grow into hubs. They may still be small, just a cluster of homes and storage pits, but their influence stretches far. Here, goods are not only traded but stored. Some communities begin to keep surplus obsidian cores, waiting to release them when demand is high or when a particular caravan is expected. This is the seed of inventory management, thousands of years before anyone writes it down on clay tablets. Specialization emerges. At the quarry sites, miners focus solely on extraction and rough shaping. Along the trail, skilled knappers set up shop to turn preforms into finished blades on demand, their hands moving with practiced precision as they chat with passers-by. Others specialize in transport, knowing the safest routes and how to move large loads with minimal damage. These roles feed each other, each making the system more efficient. With organization comes reliability. Farmers along the route can plan to trade part of their harvest for new tools every season. Hunters know when to bring furs to market to meet traders who need winter goods. Slowly, trust builds, not just between individuals but between communities. If a village on the coast trades fish for obsidian each year without fail, inland groups begin to count on that fish arriving via the network, even if they've never seen the sea. The routes themselves evolve. Shortcuts become permanent paths, cleared of undergrowth and marked with stones. River crossings get small improvements, logs anchored to make rafts more stable, or flat rocks arranged to create stepping points. In some cases, simple way stations emerge, shelters built along the trail where traders can rest, leave messages or store goods temporarily. And yet, while the system is more organized, it's still fragile. A bad harvest in one region can ripple through the network, disrupting the flow of goods and forcing traders to change their routes. A conflict between two groups can block a key pass, pushing the traffic elsewhere. The road of obsidian is a living thing, shaped by the decisions and fortunes of the people who use it. As you move along these increasingly predictable routes, you realize that what you're walking through is more than a trade road. It's an early economy. It doesn't have coins, ledgers or kings to enforce it, but it functions just the same. Goods flow from areas of surplus to areas of need, mediated by people who know the value of what they carry and the worth of what they seek. And every step of it, every exchange, still depends on that first glint of volcanic glass, struck from the heart of a mountain and shaped by human hands into something sharp enough to bind strangers together. The bigger and more reliable the obsidian network becomes, the more tempting it is for someone to control it. At first it's just individuals, skilled traders or respected elders who command influence because everyone trusts them. But over time the stakes grow. The routes now move not just tools but prestige goods, rare materials and the alliances they represent. That kind of power is too valuable to leave unclaimed. The earliest attempts at control are subtle. A group living near a volcanic source might quietly raise the price of their stone, demanding more hides, grain or exotic goods in exchange. They don't have soldiers to enforce this, just the fact that they sit directly on the source and can choose who gets access. Traders who balk at the new terms have little choice but to accept them or take the long gamble of finding another supply. Elsewhere, control comes through alliances. A chieftain in a fertile valley might strike a deal with obsidian miners in the mountains, exclusive rights to carry their stone in exchange for steady food deliveries. Now anyone passing through the valley must go through the chieftain, paying in goods or labor for the privilege. Some regions see more forceful methods. Rival groups might raid a quarry, not to steal the obsidian already cut, but to deny their competitors access. Control of the source becomes a point of pride, a proof of strength as much as an economic advantage. Over time, entire communities orient themselves around this trade. Villages near sources become fortified, not with grand stone walls yet, but with ditches, palisades or watchposts to guard against rivals. Armed escorts begin to accompany larger shipments along risky stretches of road, their presence both a deterrent and a message: this obsidian belongs to us. With control comes the temptation to monopolize. If a leader can keep all obsidian from a particular source flowing only through their hands, they can dictate what it's worth everywhere downstream. In some cases, they deliberately limit supply, releasing smaller amounts to keep the stone rare and valuable. In others, they flood the market to undercut competitors from other sources. This shift has social consequences. The obsidian trade starts to create hierarchies. Those with easy access to it gain wealth, status and influence, while those cut off from it must rely on less prestigious materials or pay high costs for the little they can get. Access to obsidian can even become a marker of identity. Certain tools or ornaments made from it may signal that you belong to an elite group or have ties to powerful allies. Still, monopoly isn't absolute. The network is too spread out, the terrain too varied, and human resourcefulness too strong. Smugglers emerge, traders who bypass official routes, sneaking through lesser-known passes to move stone from one rival's territory into another's. Middlemen disguise their sources, mixing obsidian from different origins so no one can trace where it came from. And yet as control tightens, the road of obsidian changes. It is no longer just a web of exchanges between equals. It's becoming a system where power shapes the flow as much as geography does. And for the first time you see hints of what will one day become the hallmark of all great trade routes, not just the movement of goods but the struggle to command them. For centuries, obsidian has been the sharp edge of survival and prestige, but nothing in trade lasts forever, and along the road of obsidian, you start to see the signs of change. It begins quietly, small pieces of metal appearing in markets far from the mountains. At first they are curiosities, a strange copper knife here, a hammered bronze point there. Traders treat them like exotic novelties, more symbols than tools. But soon the novelty turns to utility. Copper blades aren't as sharp as obsidian, but they're tougher. They don't shatter if dropped on stone, and they can be reshaped if damaged. Bronze, harder still, begins to outlast even the best volcanic glass. A trader can carry one metal tool for months without the constant repairs obsidian demands. For you, the change is unsettling. You still see people admiring the glassy sheen of your blades, but now some hold them alongside a copper knife and hesitate. They weigh the perfect sharpness of obsidian against the durability of metal. The choice isn't always in your favor. At first, obsidian finds a niche. It remains the blade of choice for fine, precise work, skinning animals, cutting plants for food and medicine. In some places it shifts toward ritual use. Its shine and fragility become part of its meaning in ceremonies. The blade that kills swiftly in a sacrifice, the mirror that shows the gods a flawless reflection. But as everyday tool use declines, so does demand on the trade routes. The impact on the network is gradual but relentless. Villages that once relied on obsidian shipments start making their own copper tools. Miners at the quarries find fewer traders arriving each season. Markets that once bustled with obsidian barter now favor metal ingots, salt, textiles, or livestock. In some regions, obsidian clings to life in isolated pockets, places far from metal sources, where volcanic glass is still the sharpest tool available. But the great flow that once moved it across mountains and rivers begins to slow. Paths fall quiet. Crossroads that once rang with the sound of knappers shaping blades now see more hammers striking metal. For those who lived by the road of obsidian, the change is more than economic, it's cultural. Songs about the long journey to the mountains fade from memory. The prestige of carrying obsidian blades at your belt is replaced by the gleam of bronze. Even the rituals that once used polished mirrors begin to adapt, replacing them with new symbols. Still, the stone never disappears completely. In some places it becomes a specialty good, traded less for its practicality and more for its connection to the past. A leader might commission a ceremonial dagger of obsidian to mark their rule. A healer might keep a few obsidian flakes for delicate surgical cuts. And in the far future, long after the last trader has walked the road, archaeologists will hold the glass in their hands and trace its path back to these ancient trails. For now though, you feel the weight of history shifting. The road you've walked for seasons is changing under your feet. The obsidian is still sharp, still beautiful, but the world is finding other edges, and the network it once sustained is slowly turning toward other treasures. The road is quieter now, where once you passed other traders every few days, packs heavy with obsidian, greetings exchanged in half a dozen languages. Now you can walk for weeks and see only the occasional traveler. Those you do meet often carry metal goods or livestock or bundles of dyed cloth. The black glass still moves, but in trickles, not streams. You still know the paths. Your feet remember every rise and dip, every place where a crooked tree marks the turn toward water, every wind-swept ridge where the mountains show their teeth. But the purpose has shifted. Where once you walked to meet demand, now you walk to keep tradition alive. The people at the quarry still strike the stone, but fewer bundles are made, and most go to ceremonial or prestige uses. Markets have changed. In the big gatherings, obsidian is now a small corner of the scene, a few bundles laid out beside baskets of grain and piles of bronze tools. Younger traders see it as old-fashioned, something their grandparents talk about with nostalgia. Yet when they hold a blade to the light and see its flawless edge, you can tell the fascination is still there. It's just no longer central. Some regions keep obsidian close to their hearts. In certain highland villages, it is still the material of choice for rites of passage. A young hunter might be given an obsidian-tipped spear for his first hunt, or a bride might wear a pendant cut from volcanic glass as a symbol of connection to the land. These places remain small islands of demand, enough to keep the knowledge of quarrying and knapping alive, but no longer enough to fuel the vast web of exchange the road once supported. And yet when you walk through these quieter markets, you notice something. The road hasn't vanished, it has simply changed its cargo. The paths carved by generations of obsidian traders are still here, now carrying copper, bronze, salt, wool and ideas. The network survives, even if its most famous freight has faded. For archaeologists, thousands of years from now, the obsidian will tell the story. They'll find blades from far-off sources buried in the ruins of farming villages, or shattered mirrors in the remains of ceremonial centers. They'll trace their chemical fingerprints back to the mountains you once climbed, and they'll know long before there was money, there were roads. And along those roads people carried not just stone but trust and stories, and the will to connect. You walk on, the last stretch of your journey ahead. Your pack is lighter now, but the trail feels heavy with memory. You can almost hear the footsteps of those who came before, the miners chipping at the mountain, the traders negotiating in riverside clearings, the caravans braving storms and bandits for the promise of a fair exchange. The road of obsidian may no longer dominate the flow of goods, but it has left its shape on the world, and its legacy under your feet. Wind down. I've 300 words. The air is still as the last campfire burns low. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird calls, and its sound drifts down the valley like a memory. You're far from the mountains now, but if you close your eyes, you can see the obsidian again, black and gleaming in your palm, edges catching the firelight. You can feel its cool surface, hear the sharp snap as a flake breaks free under a knapper's hand. The road beneath you is older than memory. It was here when the first traders strapped a bundle of blades to their back and set out into the unknown, and it's still here tonight, even if the cargo has changed. The earth remembers every step, yours, and the countless ones before. The markets are quiet now, but their ghosts linger in the wind. The laughter, the bargaining, the murmur of stories shared across languages. In the stillness, you realize that trade was never just about goods, it was about connection, about bringing something from your world into another's, and carrying a piece of theirs back with you. The obsidian may rest now, mostly forgotten in the shadows of bronze and iron, but its path still hums faintly in the bones of the land, and if you listen, you can almost hear it. Footsteps in the dust, voices calling greetings, the rustle of bundles being unwrapped by firelight. Let the image fade, the road softening into